It started out as something innocent, almost funny, really. Just one of those weird little things you do with your siblings when you're bored and looking for ways to kill time after dinner. My brother, Jake, always had a wild imagination. He was the kind of kid who'd come up with games that made no sense but somehow made you play along anyway. So when he came up with the idea that we needed to do something with Max, our golden retriever, every single night, I didn't question it too much. Not at first. Max has always been part of our family. He's gentle, goofy, and honestly a little too smart for a dog. Jake said Max needed a routine. Dogs love structure, he told me one night while brushing Max's fur with one of Mom's old hairbrushes. It keeps them calm. Makes them feel safe. So we started out small, taking Max on short walks right before bed. Nothing weird. Just a typical sibling and dog routine. But then things started changing. It wasn't just walks anymore. Jake started saying we had to go behind the shed in our backyard. Said Max liked it better there, less noise, more space. At first, I didn't think anything of it. We live in a quiet neighborhood, so the shed area was just another part of the yard. But we only went there after 10 p.m., when the whole street was dark and silent. Jake would always carry a flashlight, and he'd never let me hold it. "It's better this way," he'd say. I didn't ask why. Maybe I should've. That's the thing about Jake. You trust him because he always seems to know what he's doing, even when he doesn't. He's not the type to joke around when it comes to something serious. So when he started drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, circles, lines, sometimes weird symbols, I figured it was just another part of his imagination running wild. Max would sit there, perfectly still, like he was waiting for something. That's when it started to get weird. Max was never the kind of dog to sit still for more than a minute. He'd always be running around, chasing leaves or barking at shadows. But during these night routines, he'd just sit there, quiet and alert, eyes fixed on Jake. Sometimes, he'd let out a low whine, like he was trying to say something. Jake said it was normal. Said Max was connecting. I didn't even know what that meant. Then one night, Jake brought out an old box from the attic. It was dusty and heavy, wrapped in rope, like someone really didn't want it opened. I asked him where he got it and he said it belonged to Dad, but I'd never seen it before. Inside were old papers, a leather notebook, and this strange little statue of a dog, nothing like Max. It looked old. Ancient, maybe. "We're doing this for Max," Jake said, flipping through the notebook like he already knew what was inside. "He's not just a pet. He's part of something bigger." That's when I started to feel it, this strange tension in the air, like something was watching us. Even Max seemed different. His eyes didn't look the same. They looked older. And that night, for the first time, I thought about saying no. About ending whatever this was. But then Jake looked at me and said something I can't forget: "If we stop now, we can't go back." I wanted to ask him what he meant, but before I could, Max stood up, walked toward the shed door, and growled. Not a playful growl, something deeper, like a warning. We both froze. And then, we heard it. A sound from inside the shed. Something was in there. Watching. Waiting. And we had no idea what it wanted. We didn't move for what felt like forever. The shed creaked quietly in the breeze, but that sound, that low scraping or shifting noise we'd just heard from inside, it didn't come from the wind. Max's ears were straight up. His body was tense, fur standing on end. Jake kept the flashlight aimed at the shed, but even he looked nervous now, which scared me more than anything else. Jake never showed fear. Ever. "What was that?" I finally whispered, not expecting a real answer. Jake didn't say anything. He just looked at Max, then back at the shed, like he was waiting for a signal or a sign. Then, without a word, he started walking toward it. I wanted to grab his arm and pull him back, but something about the way he moved made it clear he was going in, with or without me. The flashlight beam shook slightly as he reached for the rusty latch. It squealed as he lifted it, slow and steady. Max didn't follow. He just stood by my side, still growling, which was weird. Max always followed Jake everywhere, but this time, it was like he was protecting me from something. Jake opened the shed door and stepped inside. I held my breath, half expecting to hear him scream or something crash, but there was just silence. A few seconds passed, and then he called out, "It's fine. Nothing in here." But his voice didn't sound right. It sounded too calm. Too flat. And that made my stomach twist. Still, I stepped forward. Max didn't follow. I gave him one last look and went inside. The shed was musty and cold, and the flashlight cast weird shadows across the walls. Tools hung from hooks, a couple of boxes sat in the corner, but nothing looked out of place. Still, I could feel something strange, like the air was heavier in here. Jake stood near the back wall, staring at something. When I got closer, I saw it, more of those symbols, carved into the wooden boards. Circles, triangles, even a few that looked like eyes. They weren't there last week. I was sure of it. "Did you do this?" I asked. Jake shook his head. "I think Dad did." That caught me off guard. Our dad passed away 3 years ago. We don't talk about him much, not because we didn't love him, but because there were too many questions we couldn't answer. Like why he spent so much time locked in the attic. Or why he always seemed tired, like he was carrying something too heavy to explain. "What do you mean?" I asked. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the notebook from earlier. It's all in here. I think Dad was trying to protect us. From something. I don't think Max is just a dog. I think he's part of it." "Part of what?" Jake flipped to a page and held it up to the light. There was a drawing of a dog, one that looked a lot like Max, but with glowing eyes. Below it were words in a language I didn't recognize, and a date, one that matched the day we adopted Max. My skin prickled. "Jake," I whispered, "what are we doing here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he ran his hand along the carvings in the wall, stopping at one symbol in particular, a spiral with a line through it. When he touched it, the whole shed seemed to shift, just slightly, like the floor dropped an inch and came back up. Max barked from outside, sharp and urgent. Jake looked at me. "It's starting." "What's starting?" Before he could answer, we heard it again, movement, but this time not inside the shed. It was behind it. We both froze again. Whatever was behind the shed wasn't trying to hide itself now. We could hear the crunch of leaves, slow and deliberate, like it wanted us to know it was there. Max was barking louder now, pacing in a tight circle near the corner of the shed, glancing back at us like he was urging us to leave. But Jake didn't move. He kept staring at that symbol on the wall, fingers still pressed to the spiral. I stepped closer to the back of the shed, heart pounding so loud I thought it might drown out every other sound. I wanted to look just to see what was there, but I was also terrified that once I saw it, something would change. Like this wouldn't just be some strange night with my brother and our dog. Like it would become real in a way I couldn't take back. Jake finally pulled his hand away from the wall and turned to me. "It's following us now," he said quietly, like saying it out loud might make it worse. "It's been waiting for us to start." I had no idea what he meant, but before I could ask, we both heard a new sound, low and whispery, like someone breathing just inches from the wall outside. We didn't speak. We just listened. Max suddenly went quiet. I darted outside, expecting to see something, someone, but the space behind the shed was empty. No footsteps. No sign of anyone or anything. Just the moonlight casting long shadows across the grass. But the air was colder, heavier again. Like something had just been there and slipped away the moment I got too close. That night, after we got back inside, Jake wouldn't say another word. He locked the notebook in his drawer and told me not to touch it. Max wouldn't leave my side. He kept pacing the room, occasionally stopping to stare at the window like he was watching for someone. I started digging on my own the next day. Notebooks, old photos, anything I could find in the attic or Dad's desk. That's when I found something weird, an old Polaroid photo tucked behind a drawer. It was of our backyard, years before we ever lived here. But there, in the bottom corner, was a dog. Same color. Same shape. Max. I flipped it over. There was writing on the back. One sentence, barely legible, he always finds the next one. What did that mean? Was Max part of something we were never meant to understand? That night, Jake didn't come to my room like he usually did. And when I went looking for him, I found the flashlight on the floor, and the shed door wide open. The wind had picked up, and I could feel it biting through my hoodie as I stood there, staring at the shed door swaying open in the dark. The flashlight lay right where Jake must have dropped it, half in the grass, still glowing weakly. I called his name, twice, maybe 3 times, but nothing came back. Not even Max. He was gone too. My first instinct was to run back inside and call Mom. But something told me she wouldn't believe me. I wasn't even sure I believed me. A shed door opening in the night. A photo of a dog that looked just like Max taken decades ago. Symbols in the wood, strange sounds behind walls. If I told anyone, they'd say it was just dreams or stress or maybe some messed up game between brothers. But this wasn't a game anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I picked up the flashlight and stepped into the shed. It was darker than before, like the light from outside couldn't quite reach in. Everything looked the same, but the feeling had changed. The air felt thicker. My skin crawled, like I was being watched from every angle. I scanned the corners, whispered Jake's name again. No answer. Then I noticed something new. One of the wooden floorboards near the back was slightly raised, the edge cracked like it had been pried up. I knelt down, heart hammering, and lifted it. Beneath it was a hollow space, just deep enough to hold a small box. A metal one, rusted shut. I tugged it loose and opened it slowly. Inside were more of Dad's notes, but these were different. Torn pieces of paper, sketches of that same spiral symbol, and a short line written in thick black ink, "He is not what he seems. Do not trust the dog after the 3rd night." The 3rd night. That was tonight. Before I could even process it, I heard a growl behind me, low, steady, and closer than it should have been. I turned around slowly. Max was standing at the entrance of the shed. But something about him was off. His eyes weren't their usual warm brown. They looked darker, almost hollow. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He just stared at me, silent, waiting. I stepped back, unsure what to do. My legs felt like they might give out. Then, from the shadows behind Max, I heard a whisper. A voice I recognized. "Don't move." It was Jake. He stepped into view, but not like himself. His clothes were torn, hands scraped, eyes wide like he hadn't slept in days. He looked at Max, then back at me. "You opened it," he said, almost breathless. I nodded, still clutching the note from the box. Jake swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper now. "It's not Max anymore." The flashlight flickered once. Max took a step forward. And the door behind me slammed shut. The slam of the shed door echoed like a gunshot, sealing us in with Max, if that was even still him. Jake lunged forward, grabbing my arm and pulling me back behind a stack of old crates as Max took another slow step toward us. The flashlight slipped from my grip and rolled across the floor, its beam casting long, distorted shadows that made everything look worse than it already was. "What do you mean it's not Max?" I hissed, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just kept his eyes on Max, breathing fast, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. It's not just the dog, he finally said. It's something that used him. Like a shell. I found it in Dad's notes. There's something really old, older than this house, older than anyone around here remembers. It chooses a form, something close to us. Something we'll trust. I looked over the crate at Max. He still hadn't barked or growled again. He just stood there, perfectly still, almost too still. His eyes followed every move we made, like he was waiting for a signal. Jake continued, voice low. Dad was trying to stop it. That's what all the symbols were for. He trapped it, or at least delayed it. But when he died, and we brought Max home, it started again. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear straight. But Max has been with us for years, I whispered. He's been normal, he's been our dog. Jake shook his head. Only at first. It hides until the third cycle. That's when it starts remembering what it really is. I didn't even know what to say. None of this made sense. But when I looked back at Max, those dark, unblinking eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was right. This wasn't the dog who used to jump into bed with me during thunderstorms or chase birds until he tripped over his own feet. Something had changed. And whatever it wasn't friendly. Then we heard it again, scratching. But not from inside the shed this time. From beneath it. Jake's head snapped toward the floor. That's how it came last time. Through the crawl space. I stared at him. Last time? Jake looked almost sick. This isn't the first house it's been in. There've been others. I found news clippings in the attic, families disappearing, dogs vanishing, sheds burned down. Always the same pattern. Always the third night. And every time, one of the kids survives. Before I could process that, the boards beneath our feet creaked sharply. Something was pushing up from underneath, slowly, like fingers searching for a way through. Max, or whatever he was, turned his head toward the noise, then back at us. That's when Jake pulled something from his jacket. The statue. The same one from the attic. But now, it was glowing faintly. And Jake said something I didn't expect. He wants me this time. Then the floor cracked open. The floor split with a deafening crack, splinters flying as something dark and formless surged up from the crawlspace. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, no clear shape, just shadow and smoke and this horrible low hum that made the air vibrate around us. Max, or the thing pretending to be Max, stood still, watching it rise, like he was waiting for it. Or maybe welcoming it. Jake didn't hesitate. He stepped between me and the thing, statue clenched tightly in his hands. The glow was brighter now, pulsing with each breath he took. He didn't look scared anymore. Just focused. Determined. This is what Dad died trying to finish, he said over the sound of the floorboards cracking and the hum growing louder. He knew it would come back. He knew someone had to finish what he started. The shadow reached out, long, claw-like arms stretching toward us, but Jake raised the statue high and slammed it into the center of the spiral carved on the back wall. The whole shed shook. The symbols began to burn with a soft orange light, one by one, like a circuit being completed. The shadow let out a sharp, shrieking sound, retreating slightly. Max snarled and lunged at Jake, but I moved before I could even think, grabbing a broken piece of wood and swinging it as hard as I could. It connected with a sickening crack, and Max hit the wall hard, collapsing in a heap. Jake turned back toward the statue, now burning hot in his hands. "You have to leave," he shouted. "Get out and don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," I screamed, grabbing his arm. But his eyes were locked on the swirling shadows in front of us, and I could see it, he knew what was coming next. "I have to hold it here," he said. "That's the only way this works. It has to choose me. If it takes me, it can't take you." The glow from the symbols grew brighter, until the entire shed was bathed in light. I stumbled back, shielding my eyes, the heat pressing against my skin like a furnace. And then Jake stepped forward, into the heart of it all. The shadow surged toward him, but so did the light. They collided, and the sound that followed wasn't even a sound. It was silence. Complete, deafening silence. Then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, the shed was still. The floor was intact. The symbols were gone. The statue had shattered into ash. And Jake was gone. Max lay still in the corner, unmoving. But he looked different now. Smaller. Normal. Just a dog again. I stepped outside, shaking, heartbroken, mind reeling. I'd lost my brother, but the thing was gone. The nightmare was over. Or so I thought. Until I got home the next night, and found another spiral, this time, scratched into my bedroom wall. Underneath it were 2 words, written in the same ink from Dad's notes. Next one. I stood in my room staring at the spiral on the wall, my legs frozen in place. The ink looked fresh, like it had just been drawn. But the house had been locked. I'd walked in alone, turned on all the lights, checked every room. It didn't make sense. Jake was gone. The shadow had vanished. Max was asleep in the living room again, quiet and normal, like nothing had ever happened. But something was still here. Watching. Waiting. For hours I sat on my bed, trying to make sense of it. Everything Jake had said, all of Dad's warnings, the stories in the attic, they all pointed to one thing. This wasn't about just one night or one family. It was a cycle, a pattern. It didn't end just because Jake had stepped into the light. Maybe he had delayed it. Maybe he had trapped it again. But the spiral was a sign. It was starting over. The next few days were strange. Quiet, but in the wrong way. Mom came home and asked where Jake had gone. I told her he left to stay with a friend for a while. She didn't question it too much, maybe because she didn't want to. Or maybe because she felt it too. That weird shift in the air. The silence that settled in the corners of the house like dust. Max followed me everywhere now. Not in a creepy way, just protective. I wanted to believe the thing inside him was really gone, that he was just our dog again. But sometimes, I caught him looking at the spiral on the wall. Like he remembered. I took down the attic stairs again, digging through every note Dad had left, trying to find something Jake missed. Something to tell me what happens after. And eventually, I found a letter, one I hadn't seen before. It was sealed in an envelope at the bottom of an old box, addressed to me. In it, Dad explained everything. The entity had no name, no face. It fed on fear, confusion, and trust, especially trust in something close. Like a brother. Or a dog. The statue was only part of the seal. The real key was choice. Sacrifice. That's why Jake had to stay. Because in choosing to be taken, he weakened it. Gave the rest of us a chance to live. But the spiral meant it would return. The letter ended with a warning: if you see the mark again, it's your turn to decide. Weeks passed. Then months. Life moved on, or at least tried to. I started sleeping with the light on. I stopped walking near the shed. I even thought about getting rid of Max once, but the way he curled up next to my bed every night reminded me of who he'd always been before all this. And then, one morning, the spiral was gone. Just faded into the wall like it had never been there. No scratches. No ink. Just smooth paint and silence. I don't know if that means it's over, or if it just moved on to someone else. Maybe some other kid with an older brother and a dog and a strange feeling in the middle of the night. But I do know one thing: I'll never forget what Jake did. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood between me and something none of us could fully understand, and he gave up everything for me. That's not something you ever really come back from. So yeah, my brother made me do this with our dog every night. And for a while, I thought it was just some weird bonding thing, or maybe him messing with me. But now I know it was more. It was protection. A ritual. A warning. And maybe, just maybe, it saved my life.